This is the fourth part and last part of The Winged Warrior. Beginning in late February 1916, the German army began an offensive attack on Verdun, France, that would last for months. The French were putting up an enormous effort to stop the Germans from taking Verdun. Because of this ferocious battle, the Verdun sector of the Western Front was where the German air service was most active, leaving the British sector relatively quiet most of the time, yet the Huns were still keeping our squadron busy enough. On the afternoon of May 31st, Sea Flight was on a DOP, that's a distant offensive patrol, about 10 miles deep into Germany when our flight of four FE-2B scouts was jumped by three Fokker Eindeckers. Before our flight took off, Captain Pierce explained to us about a defensive tactic he had heard about. Our pusher scouts would fly in a circle, each airplane covering the tail of the machine in front. We would use this tactic should we be attacked by several enemy scouts at one time. And that time was now. Captain Price led us into this defensive formation. The Eindeckers could not get close to us because of our covering fire. The funny thought came to me as we flew around and around that we were just like an Old West wagon train circling during an Indian attack. Our flight commander was slowly pulling us west to safety, and his observer, Lieutenant Libby, was getting in some good shots at the Huns. One of the Eindeckers got too close to Captain Price's scout, and Lieutenant Libby put some bullets into the German's engine, causing the craft to catch fire. Down the Hun went in smoke and flames. I felt sorry for the pilot. To die a flaming death was the worst way to go. When the two enemy pilots saw their comrade go down in flames, they lost heart and broke off the engagement. Lieutenant Albert Ball was having success flying his lone wolf patrols, and I wondered what the key to success was. "You've been flying nothing but lone patrols. Why?" I asked. "Well, surprise is crucial. When you fly in a formation of scouts, the enemy is going to easily spot you. But when you are flying alone, it is much easier to sneak up on an enemy machine. I'm thinking about trying out our French Newport. I hear that it's very agile and can climb like a rocket. And with the machine gun on the top wing, I can pull it back to shoot upwards. Yes, I think firing from below the enemy craft is the best way to disable it," I replied. All through late spring, the French government was begging the British to start a major offensive attack on the Germans. Verdun was bleeding the French army dry, and the French desperately needed help. So, on the 1st of July, the British Army launched the Battle of the Somme. Just as the Union Army was mowed down at Fredericksburg in 1862, the British Army suffered a similar fate during the Somme offensive. The Tommies were mowed down by German machine guns. The casualties were shocking. The air in our sector was becoming very active because of this battle, and my roommate scored 2 victories in one day on July 2nd. That night, I asked Ball to describe what happened. Early this morning, I was flying in our new Newport Scout, a little bit southeast of Aires, when I spotted a Hun two-seater headed for the front. I banked and got between him and the sun. I was approaching him from the east and used the sun's glare to make myself invisible. I flew under the Hun. I think it was a Roland C2. I pulled the top wing's Lewis machine gun back to point it up at the enemy aeroplane and let him have it. He went into an out of control spin, and I watched him crash. Excuse me. And I watched him crash into a ruined farmhouse. "What about your other victory for the day?" I asked. Late this afternoon, I was on a second patrol of the day when I saw 2 white puffs of Archie in the sky above our lines. I quickly spotted the enemy aeroplane. It was a two-seater, an aviatik, and the Hun was taking photographs of the ground our troops had won in the previous 2 days of fighting. "So what happened?" I asked. "Well, I was about 1,500 feet above him. and neither the Hun pilot or his observer had seen me. I put the Newport into a dive directly at the Aviatik. The observer was still hunched over his camera when I opened up with my Lewis gun at about 50 yards. After just 10 rounds, I saw both the Huns slump over. I swerved to the right and watched the aircraft fall like a leaf, crashing into no man's land. Albert, you're beginning to run up quite a score of victories. That was your 10th. Perhaps I need to try out the Newport as well, I remarked. Yes, I love the way the little scout handles. You should definitely try it. We were already flying 3 sorties a day during the Battle of the Somme. That much flying left us exhausted at the end of each day. But while we were busy with fighting the air war, our Royal Engineers were building us the newest of inventions, Nissen huts. These were corrugated metal huts with a curved roof and were a welcome change from the tents we'd been living in. I went to a mess hall early on the 22nd of August and saw Lieutenant Ball in the middle of his breakfast. I got my food and took the seat across from him. Good morning, Albert, I said. Good morning, he replied. So today is your last day with 11 Squadron, I said. Yeah, tomorrow I will be transferred to a new squadron, number 60, and since today is my last day with 11 Squadron, I will do my best to score another victory. That night we had a going away party for Lieutenant Ball, but there was an additional reason to celebrate. Earlier that day, Albert Ball had done something no other RFC pilot had ever done. He shot down 3 enemy aeroplanes in one patrol. They were 3 Roland two-seaters on a bombing run. Ball was an incredibly brave pilot, taking all 3 Hun machines on it at the same time. Hundreds of British infantry were witness to the dogfight, so his victory was confirmed without any problem. I was sad to see him go. Number 11 Squadron was losing our number 1 ace, and in the evening I would miss his beautiful violin playing. One morning in September 1916, I was flying at about 6,000 feet over the lines and carefully watching below me for enemy reconnaissance machines when I saw something very strange moving across the battlefield. It wasn't like anything I'd ever seen before. It looked like a metal monster slowly advancing towards the Germans. I began to lose height so I could get a better look at what this strange creature was. They looked like enormous metal boxes on tractor wheels, and the things were spitting cannon and machine gun fire from their side ports. I rushed my report to Major Reese as soon as I landed there at the aerodrome. Our squadron commander looked the report over and said, Lieutenant Corbett, what you saw today was our newest weapon. It's called the Mark I tank, and I think you will see a lot more of them in the future. Yes, sir, I think with enough of those armored vehicles, we could punch a hole in the German lines. Let's hope so, replied the major. The Great War during 1916 had been a meat grinder. The battles of attrition at Verdun and the Somme had taken a terrible toll on the Allied armies. Yet for the RFC, an even worse time was ahead. The German air service had regained air superiority with the introduction of the Albatross Scout. This streamlined Scout was not only fast, but it carried 2 Spandau machine guns. The introduction of the Albatross Scout in September 1916 happened at the same time the German Air Service reorganized and formed squadrons called Jastas. Now, instead of fighting 1 or 2 Hun scouts, we had to take on dozens at a time, which meant that we had to send up greater numbers of aeroplanes to compensate. Aerial battles were becoming big dogfights. And now I'm going to take a second to show you my painting of an albatross, if I can, an albatross and a Newport. Okay, and that's this painting right there. And let's let's see. I think you can see the German airplane is the Albatross, and the and it's chasing a French Newport. Okay, and I do a little oil painting. All right. As the year came to a close, I was granted a week of leave time. I arrived in Paris 2 days before Christmas, met Michelle at the train station, and boarded a train bound for Rouen. I was invited to spend my Christmas holiday at Michelle's family home, located about 10 kilometers south of the cathedral city. Michelle's parents welcomed me into their home. I was fortunate that her father spoke a little English. However, her mother spoke only French. After I was introduced to Monsieur and Madame Dupin, I was escorted to Michelle's brother's bedroom, where I placed my bag at the foot of his bed. The next day, Michelle took me on a tour of the Dupin vineyards. In my mind's eye, I could imagine how in the summertime, the rolling hills would be covered with vines that were heavy, laden with grapes. We walked hand in hand up the hillside. When we reached the top of the hill, we could see all the way to the river Marne. After exploring the Dupin estate's landscape, Michelle took me into the wine cellar. It was stocked to the ceiling full of bottles of champagne, while one section of the cellar was reserved for bottles of red table wine. That night, Christmas Eve, we enjoyed a wonderful meal. We had turkey stuffed with chestnuts, and for dessert, a delicious buttercream cake. While Michelle and her mother washed the supper dishes, Monsieur Dupin and I sat in a couple of big comfortable chairs and talked. He asked me what it was like flying, and had I shot down a Boche yet. Boche was French for a hard-headed person, usually referring to the Germans. Well, sir, so far I have only one victory to my credit. My observer and I shot down a German balloon last year. Then, just after Christmas 1915, I was shot down myself, suffering several broken bones. I was in the hospital for the first few months of this year, and Michelle was kind enough to come and visit me. Your daughter's very sweet. Ah, merci. As you say, she is sweet, he replied. That night I slept in Michelle's brother's bed. I wondered what kind of Christmas Eve poor Auguste was having. My time with Michelle and her family during the Christmas holiday was precious. Every moment I was with Michelle, I could bottle up the memory and save it for a rainy day. The Albatross D1 and 2 were good scouts, but the Germans improved the design by making the wings more like the Newport Scouts. The German engineers made the lower wing narrower and used a V strut like the Newport. This made the Albatross faster and gave it a better rate of climb. Coupled with twin Spandau machine guns, this new scout was the terror of the skies in the spring of 1917. Most days in early 1917, I flew 2 patrols a day. Sometimes I would fly in formation in my FE-2B, and sometimes I would go on a lone wolf patrol in the Newport Scout. On the 7th of April, I received good news. The previous day, the United States declared war on Germany. Finally, my country joined the Allied cause. In a few months, I would be able to transfer to the American Air Service. Glory be! On Easter Monday, April 9th, the Battle of Arras began. Light snow was falling as the British forces attacked the German positions. That morning, the British Army pushed the Germans back more than 3 miles. This was the biggest gain on the Western Front since September 1914. In the afternoon, the Canadians took Vimy Ridge, a major accomplishment. In the next few days, the German reinforcements arrived to shore up their defenses, and the British advance slowly ground to a halt. During this British offensive, the Royal Flying Corps put every airplane it could into the air. Many of these machines were out of date, whereas the German Air Service had nearly every one of the fighter squadrons equipped with the new Albatross D3. The result became known to the RFC as Bloody April. I was scheduled for a dawn patrol on the morning of April 12th, 1917. I woke up at 4 o'clock, got dressed as warmly as possible, and had a quick breakfast in the mess hall. By the time I had finished eating, my ground crew had the Newport Scout ready for me. I walked out to the Scout and climbed in. A mechanic swung the propeller and the engine coughed to life. The chocks were pulled away and I taxied onto the field. I pointed the little Scout into the wind and took off. Flurries of snow were falling from a dark lead-gray sky, and I soon was flying into the clouds. I kept my little Scout in a steady climb, heading east, and at 6,000 feet I popped through the clouds into a clear blue sky. Below me, the clouds looked like a carpet made of dirty cotton. The sun was just beginning to rise above the distant clouds on the horizon, and once the sun was clear, the sky had turned a beautiful blue. Since I couldn't see the ground below, I had to use dead reckoning to navigate. I decided to fly a couple of miles into enemy territory and then turn north. I should be a little bit north of Arras, perhaps in the vicinity of Vimy, which the Canadians had captured 2 days ago. I saw in the distance a Hun two-seater flying at about 9,000 feet towards the north. I decided to try to sneak up on the Hun and began a shallow dive to get behind and below the enemy aircraft. Suddenly, I heard the ack-ack-ack of a machine gun, and bullets were popping by my left ear like a swarm of bees. I instinctively threw the Scout into a tight right turn. As I banked hard to the right, I looked over my shoulder and saw an albatross painted all bright red. Oh my God, it was the infamous Red Baron. And as if that wasn't enough, I saw 5 other albatross scouts after me. One painted half red and green took a shot at me as I crossed in front of him. My little Newport could outturn the heavier albatross scouts, and I put into several corkscrew turns, losing altitude each time I completed a turn. I was hoping to find safety in a cloud bank below. I was nearly to the top of the cloud layer when a red and black albatross began shooting at me. I saw tracer bullets whizzing by. Then bang, zing, my engine began to cough. Quickly, I turned the ignition off. I would rather take a bullet than die a terrible death by burning. I pushed hard forward my joystick, and in 2 seconds was flying into the fog of a dense cloud. Thank God for clouds. I just might get out of this scrap with the Red Baron's Jasta. Gliding through the dense cloud was eerie. All I could hear was the wind passing through the bracing wires. I kept a close eye on my compass, keeping my kite headed due west. The cloudy mist parted, and I could see I was about 100 feet above a ridge with charred and shattered trees covering it. Vimy Ridge, perhaps. Lucky for me, my Scout was gliding over the downhill side of the ridge, and stretching before me was flat land. I had no trouble gliding over the tree remains and hoped soon to get a place to land. My little Scout would not glide much longer, though. I was going to have to put her down soon. Just ahead, I could see some flat ground, but there was a strand of barbed wire, and I needed to get over that before putting her down. I tried to clear the barbed wire, but I woke up in hospital. As a nurse was walking by, I got her attention. "Where am I?" I asked. "This is St. John's Hospital, London," she replied. My next question was, "What's the date?" "It's May 12th, she answered. "You've been in a coma for over a month. Hang on, love, I'll fetch a doctor." The doctor told me I had a bad concussion, broken collarbone, broken right arm, my left ankle was broken. Once again, my body was in a lot of casts. I had the feeling I would soon be on a ship sailing home to America. I missed my mother and father. After almost 2 years away from home and surviving 2 crash landings, I was ready for some of my mother's home cooking. My ship steamed across the Atlantic Ocean without incident. The weather was mild, and I had plenty of time to reflect on the past 2 years. One thing I was sure of, I was lucky to be alive after being attacked by the infamous Red Baron, Manfred von Richthofen. The end. Thank you for watching The Winged Warrior, my short story, which is included in the book The Drummer Boy of Olstee. So if you like, you can buy that book on Amazon. Thank you for your time. Bye now.